In the Gun, episode 113. It is Phil Friday here on In the Gun. I'm Schuyler Callihan. That is Jed Drenning. And here in just a few minutes, we'll talk to the guy, our guy, Phil Steele. So before we do that, we're going to go and recap Jed and I's picks, or should I say, well, yeah, we'll say Jed's picks from last week, as me and Wes kind of had a funny joke before we made that our picks last week, that if he had all of his picks wrong or had a bad week, we were going to blame it on Jed, and that Jed fed him those picks before the show. If not, Wes was going to take ownership for those. But I think he didn't do too hot, so I think he's putting this one on you, Jed. I'm sorry.
I step out for 1 week, and Wes comes in and throws 3 picks. Right?
Right.
Okay,
see what happens when you leave the kids to the house.
Our handicapping picks against Central Florida. First, we asked Garrett over under 275 combined yards passing and running. You both picked over. You both thought that seemed pretty low, the 275. Garrett ended up with 211 total yards, 156 passing, 55 rushing. So double red X on the first one. On the second question, we tried to get a couple questions about these Florida high school kids that we have on the roster. We asked, all right, which of these things is going to happen? Pick A, B, C, or D. C.J. Donaldson scores a touchdown. Traylon Ray scores a touchdown. C, both score a touchdown, or D, neither. You hit that one, correct? You picked C.J. So you got that one, and I believe Wes picked neither. Is that correct? What Wes said?
Yeah, neither.
So red X for Wes on that one, because C.J. obviously did score a touchdown, going back to his home state. And then moving on to question 3, same type of thing. We focused on the Florida kids. Defensive question, pick one of the following. Aubrey Burks intercepts a pass, Oak Ridge, Florida kid. D. Hawkins records a TFL. Lauderdale, Florida kid. Lauderhill, Florida kid. Jacoby Spells, who did get some reps, records 2 tackles against UCF. And the catch-all answer was all of the above or none of the above. Pick for this?
I went with Hawkins.
You went with Hawkins.
Yep.
So that did not happen. We had a couple TFLs. He did not have one of them. Wes picked Aubrey to intercept the pass. And strange thing is, I tell you what, if you'd have told him we were going to have 3 picks, he'd have felt pretty good.
Yeah.
But one of them wasn't by Aubrey. So both of you missed that one. A couple of those pretty tough.
Yeah,
a couple of those pretty tough, especially involving those multiple kids. So I guess Wes, in my stead, goes 0 for 3. Thanks, buddy. And you went 1 for 3. Is that the case?
That's typically what I bat on here is 1 for 3. Yeah, so
that's good enough to win last week.
That is, and for those of you who know my background, I'm a baseball guy. So to me, that's still a pretty good batting average, right?
That's success.
That's success. That's success in my book.
We're gonna have some fun, handicapping after Phil with BYU coming to town. We're gonna have some fun with that one. So we have 3 that we're going to focus on there.
Yeah. Okay. And the Garrett Green one, by the way, if you would have told me 211 was his total, I would have been a little concerned heading into that game. But hey, they found a way to still run up 41 points on the board, run for over 200 yards, and found a way to get another win, win number 5 on the season. So good stuff for the Mountaineers. Again, we're going to be talking to Phil Steele here in just a moment. Also, this episode of ITG is brought to you by Bet Online, where the game starts, and by our friends at Toothman Ford, where we all know cars cost less in Grafton. So stay tuned. We'll be right back here with Phil Steele, talk some Big 12, Top 25, and West Virginia BYU.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter @InTheGunPodcast.
All right, everybody, and we are now here with Phil Steele talking some Big 12 top 25 in that West Virginia BYU game at the end of the show. Phil, always enjoy having you on, my guy.
Always a pleasure, and I tell you, it's got to be a lot nicer there with the nice victory West Virginia picked up on the road last week.
Yeah, absolutely. 41-28 over UCF, and now with a win this weekend, West Virginia will become bowl eligible. So definitely something to look forward to this weekend when the Mountaineers and Cougars line up at Mountaineer Field, 7 o'clock on FS1. And let's go ahead and start things off here in the top 25, Phil. It is number 12, Missouri at number 2, Georgia. Missouri's kind of the sleeping giant here, I guess, in some senses here in the SEC at 7-1. I know, at least for me, I did not see this coming from the Missouri Tigers, and I don't know if they're going to give Georgia much of a shot in this one, but it's been a great season so far for Missouri.
Yeah, and I think it has been a great season for Missouri, and I think when it comes to Georgia, though, it all depends on who their opponent is. You know, they're 67% play when they're taking on a ranked team, so they tend to get fired up. Remember a few weeks back against Kentucky, Kentucky had just ran all over their Florida, and Georgia had just allowed 200 yards rushing to Auburn. And can Kentucky beat Georgia? Nope, 51-13. And then last week, no Brock Bowers. What's going to happen? Florida's going to give Georgia a big game. Nope, 43-20. And now you got a 7-1 Missouri coming in. And this is a Missouri team that almost beat them last year. You go back and look at that game on the road. Missouri led almost start to finish. Georgia managed to come back and win it 26-22. Georgia did have a 28-14 first down edge in the game. Georgia did have a 481-294 yard edge. But I think all the talk is, can Missouri be the king of the East? Can Missouri do it? Nope, Georgia's going to get it done. So I like Georgia. I'm laying the 15.5 here, and I think Georgia wins this one much more comfortable than expected.
Bill, out west in the Pac-12, we have unbeaten Washington and Michael Penix on the road at USC. Washington debuts in the college football playoff rankings at 5th, despite their unblemished record, but they are going to have plenty of chances to improve their resume and climb, starting with this game at Southern Cal. Is this Southern Cal's last stand?
Oh, absolutely. If Southern Cal loses this one, I mean, they got to go to Oregon next week. It could be a long, long season. And when you look at USC, they have been very solid as a home underdog. In fact, I think they're like 5-1 as a home dog the last 6 times. And as unimpressive as USC has been the last 2 weeks, so is Washington. I mean, Washington could have lost to Arizona State if not for that interception return for a touchdown. And then last week, Stanford's within 2 points of them in the fourth quarter. 2 straight lackluster games for them. And even the Oregon game, they got outgained by 126 yards in that game. Now, I think the Michael Penix and that offense is going to be able to move the ball in USC. And I think Caleb Williams and that offense is going to be able to move the ball on Washington. I know the total's high in this one. It's like 76, but you kind of like the over because I think both teams' offenses are going to be scoring punch for punch all the way through. The fact USC's a home dog has me leaning with USC here. I think they can pull the upset and get the win. And as you mentioned, it would be their last stand. They need to win this game just to stay relevant this year. So I'm going to call for USC to get the win at home in a high-scoring game.
Phil, Clemson and Dabo, they've been in the news pretty much all week for obvious reasons. You know, they're 4-4, and then obviously the call he had calling out the caller on the radio show about his job and all that stuff. It's been an interesting week for Clemson. They're 4-4, but they're only 3-point underdogs here to Notre Dame, which is a little interesting, again, considering where these two teams are at. A few weeks ago, Notre Dame's offense was kind of stuck in the mud, but they've kind of rebounded over the last 2 weeks, putting up 48 on USC and then a good old 58 piece on the Pitt Panthers. So, I mean, who would have thought that maybe over halfway through the season, Clemson could fall below the 500 mark?
Yeah, shocking. And I put this out on my Twitter, which is at PhilSteele042, and it said Clemson has already lost 4 games this year. In those 4 losses, Clemson has a 94-60 first down edge. And 2 of the losses were in overtime and games they had a touchdown lead in the fourth quarter. I mean, they could easily be undefeated at this point. 94-60 first downs in the games they lost. So When I look at this game, I have no interest in playing it spread wise, but I guess my forecast would be Clemson will have the first down edge, Clemson will have the yardage edge, and somehow Notre Dame will win the game. So it should actually be a pretty good game. Clemson's playing with legitimate revenge. They're at home. They're in the Death Valley. They can turn their season around, win their final 4 games, and go 8-4 and salvage something this year. This is a really good Notre Dame team as well that just dominates ACC foes. So I think it's just going to be a really good game. And like I said, I think Clemson gets the first down, a yardage edge. Notre Dame wins it. Should be a close game.
Last top 25 before we jump into the Big 12, Phil, you really have me paying attention to this Alabama offensive line. Okay. Now, which is more surprising? You got LSU coming to Alabama in a battle of top 15 teams. Which is more surprising? The fact that Alabama's offensive line has allowed the most sacks in the SEC with 35, or the fact that LSU is 13th defensively in the SEC and getting sacks with just 11?
Yeah, that's a good matchup for Alabama. They might have a finally get it where they can protect their quarterback, and I think that's a good thing for them this week. And with LSU, they're a little banged up. You look at their cornerback depth, and it's pretty low. They're missing 3 or 4 cornerbacks. They're missing one of their top defensive linemen. So I think Alabama will look good here. And this is amazing. You've got Alabama playing with revenge at home. They're a dynamic home favorite. And they're only given 3 points in this game. And it's almost like LSU is regarded as the better team here. And it all becomes the offense. I mean, Jaden Daniels is having a Heisman type of season, 25 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But he has taken on a really good Alabama defense. It's holding opponents to 115 yards per game below their season average. Last year, Alabama suffered a tough loss on the road. That was a game in which they had the yardage edge. They outgained LSU by about 100 yards, but lost it in overtime. I think if you give Nick Saban revenge at home with the better defense, and as you mentioned, LSU's defense hasn't been getting to the quarterback. That may give Jalen Milroe more time here. I like Alabama to win this one by about a touchdown or more.
Schuyler, cherry on top for Phil before we jump into the Big 12. Credit where credit's due. Last week, what did he say about Alabama, Tennessee? He said Alabama at home by double digits against the Vols. That's exactly what played out. But once again, Phil nailed it. Go ahead, Schuyler.
The man knows what he's talking about. That's why he's on our show every Friday. He gives us the insight. So 82-3, by the way, is the score in the Kansas State games over the last 2 weeks. And I don't think that's going to necessarily go in their favor this week against Texas. It's probably going to be a little bit closer, probably maybe even the Longhorns coming out on top. But this is going to be a really good matchup. Kansas State, one of the 5 teams tied atop the Big 12 conference standings. Texas obviously not going to have Quinn Ewers in this one. Phil, it's a very interesting matchup without Quinn Ewers. How can Texas put this thing together offensively around Malik Murphy?
Yeah, very impressed with Kansas State each of the last 2 weeks. In fact, last 3 weeks, they went into Texas Tech, came out of there with that nice win. And I think current form right now, Kansas State's playing as good as anybody in the Big 12. And Texas, I was sort of nonplussed with their victory over BYU last week. Yes, they won. Yes, they covered. They won 35-6. But Malik Murphy had the interception. He had the fumble. He wasn't 100%. It didn't look 100% as far as being able to be as good as Quinn Ewers. But now he's got a start under his belt. He's still at home. I think he'll probably have a better game this week. And then I look at Kansas State and how they have fared on the road this year. They lost to Missouri on the road by 3. They lost to Oklahoma State by 8. And even the Texas Tech game, that was a turnover-fueled game. Remember, they're taking on Texas Tech's third-string quarterback. They were +3 in turnovers. They actually got outgained in that game at Texas Tech, but came out with a 17-point win via the turnover. So I don't think they played as good away as they have at home. And really, when you look at Texas on the hoof, I mean, look at their running backs, look at their offensive line, look at the receivers, the defensive front, the linebackers, the secondary. They are one of the most talented teams in the country. They're at home. They're only laying 4 points here. Who would have thought that 2-3 weeks ago, especially prior to the Oklahoma game? I just think Texas plays their A game here. Kansas State hasn't played as well on the road. I'm going to go with Texas. Even though the quarterbacks I would favor Kansas State, I think the overall talent goes to Texas, as does the home edge.
We have Bedlam and Stillwater, 2 ranked teams, number 9 Oklahoma, number 22 Oklahoma State. This is a big one. Oklahoma trying to rebound from that loss in Lawrence. Will there be a hangover effect there? But what's fascinating about this, Ollie Gordon has taken the nation by storm. We were part of his run that he's on. Against Cincinnati, Cincinnati's defense had not allowed a team to run for more than 125 yards through 7 games. They got a couple NFL defensive linemen, Cincinnati does. They were gashed by Oklahoma State for 325 last week in Kansas. Kansas had success on the ground. Brent Venables and crew is going to have their hands full on the road in this game in Stillwater, right?
Yeah, I've been riding Oklahoma State ever since that Kansas State game, and I thought the key to Oklahoma State this year was the switch to as opposed to using 3 quarterbacks like they did the first 3 games, going to Alan Bowman in Game 4. And in Game 4, they put up 409 yards against a really good Iowa State team, and then upset Kansas State, upset Kansas, unfortunately upset West Virginia. But then last week just blasted Cincinnati. I love the good current form that they're in right now. As you mentioned, Ollie Gordon is having a tremendous season. 271 yards last week, 282 yards the week before. The last guy that did that at Oklahoma State, back-to-back games of 250 plus, you might have heard of him, Barry Sanders. And Ollie Gordon, I think, as you mentioned, is rocketing to the Heisman talk and the best running back in the country. This is Bedlam. This is the last time at home. Oklahoma State wanted to continue this series. Oklahoma got out of the Big 12 and said, we're not going to continue this thing. It's their last shot. It's the home crowd. They're going to be loud. I think it's going to be a great game. I give Oklahoma State a tremendous shot at pulling the upset here. And right now, when you look at the two teams and how they're playing, they're both playing about dead even the last 4 weeks, and Oklahoma State's at home. So I definitely like the underdog Cowboys in this one with a potential upset.
Phil and Jed, hold your nose for this next one. It's a stinker. It's Baylor and Houston. And one of these teams has got to find a way to win this game. Baylor is a team that has really struggled at home this season. Phil mentioned that last week, and it blew my mind when I actually went to look at the schedule. They're 1-5. When playing in Waco. And if it weren't for a pair of Big 12 newcomers in Long Island, it wouldn't be too much of good vibes around the Baylor program, even though there's not really much right now anyways. And then for Houston, on the flip side, I mean, look, if it wasn't for a certain play at the end of a certain game, they wouldn't have a Big 12 win to this point in the schedule either. So one of these teams got to find a way to come out on top, Phil. Do you feel like Baylor can maybe get that second Big 12 home win?
Yeah, and I think they must win this game. This is almost one of those must-win situations. You lose this thing, you got at Kansas State, at TCU, and then West Virginia to finish out the year. Surprisingly, I've seen Dave Aranda on the hot seat, which is ridiculous. The guy's a tremendous head coach, did a tremendous job 2 years ago. Yes, they've been struggling lately, but they're at home for this one. It's a circle the wagons game. I can see them giving their best game of the year. Blake Shapen is back in the lineup. Remember, he missed like 3 games earlier, part of that losing stretch that they had. So with Shapen, I think Baylor's the better team at home, and I do think they come out of here with the win. And Houston last week just got mauled by Kansas State, and I think you hit it right on the head. If not for that Hail Mary, they are winless in the Big 12 as it is. So I'm going to go with Baylor in this one minus the points.
Fascinating game with Kansas, a ranked Kansas team after the big win against Oklahoma heading into Ames. Kansas having the season that a lot of people thought they might, but meanwhile, Iowa State has circled the wagons after that loss at Ohio. They've won 3 straight in the league, 4 out of 5 overall. Kansas has had success running the football, but you don't step into Ames, Iowa and run on John Heacock's defense the way Kansas has run on some of these defenses they've had success with. I think maybe what they do is they look at that template of Oklahoma State loading the box against Kansas and having success in forcing Jason Bean to beat you. What do you see playing out here? Fascinating game at Jack Trice Stadium.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of the points right on. So that's congrats for that. I mean, I think Iowa State's defense will be able to stuff Kansas's run game. They were strong against everybody this year. They're holding opponents to 67 yards per game below their season average. And they're playing with a lot of confidence right now. I mean, this is a team that even the Oklahoma game, go back and look at that. Yeah, they lost by 30 points, but in the second quarter, it was a 3-point game, and it just went south on them. Other than that, they've been pretty dominant. I thought they dominated TCU. They dominated Cincinnati. They dominated Baylor, and even beat that red-hot Oklahoma State team. So I like the way Rocco Beck's throwing the football. And I think when you look at Eli Sanders and Cartavius Norton, they're going to be able to run the ball on Kansas. Kansas, the last 4 weeks, given up 256 yards per game on the ground, 5.6 yards per carry. That's almost 6 yards every time you try to run the ball in that defense. We saw Kansas last year fail a little bit down the stretch, will fail a lot down the stretch, and they're coming off a massive win at home. Now they're traveling. They're not as good on the road. Their 2 Big 12 road games this year, they lost to Texas and Oklahoma State. Jack Trice Stadium, one of the tougher venues to go in and try to win. And I'm surprised that Iowa State's less than a field goal favorite here, like -2.5. I definitely like Iowa State in this one to win this one by about a touchdown or more.
UCF at Cincinnati. It's another one of those stinker games, but again, someone's got to find a way to get their first Big 12 win this weekend. And just so we can throw out another mention to Pitt here, Cincinnati has not won a game since they beat those Pitt Panthers way back in early September. So, Phil, who's getting that first Big 12 win this weekend?
Yeah, you mentioned neither one has won a game. And as explosive as Cincinnati looks at times, I mean, you watch them in the first half in some of their games, and you got Emory Jones running the ball. You got Kiner running the football. They're averaging 5 yards a carry, over 200 yards per game on offense. The second half, they seem to go away. And Emory Jones, has had some interception problems this year. He's tossed 9 of them. John Rice Plumlee's also thrown 7. So I think whichever quarterback plays the cleaner game is probably going to be the key here. Watching both teams through the Big 12 play so far, I do feel UCF's a slightly better team. And I know it's on the road, but I'm going to lean with UCF to come out of there with the win. But of all the Big 12 games this week, this is probably the stinker of the bunch, with neither one having a Big 12 win this year.
In Morgantown, here we go. This kind of has vibes, Phil, of West Virginia's first Big 12 loss back in 2012. We made a trip to Texas, had a big win under the lights at DKR. The next week, had to turn around, come back to Morgantown, and then go all the way up to Lubbock and got smoked by Texas Tech. Well, look what BYU's going through. Trip to DKR, played at Texas last week, back to Provo, all the way across the country to Morgantown. And it doesn't seem that Vegas can get a bead on West Virginia. I mean, there's been some eye-popping spreads with this team, whether we're a 14-point underdog against TCU and win, whether we're favored against Oklahoma State and lose. We were somewhat of a significant underdog, 7-8 points at UCF last week. Same thing this week with BYU. We're favored by double digits at home against BYU. What do you see playing out at Mountaineer Field with BYU and the Mountaineers?
Yeah, last week's spread I mentioned on the show surprised me. I thought that West Virginia would be 3-point dog at most in that game. Was surprised that it was 7.5, 8, and the Mountaineers played well. First of all, I like the matchups of this game. You look at BYU so far this year in Big 12 play, they're giving up 5 yards per carry. Now that goes right into the strength of West Virginia, that offensive line, those running backs, Garrett Green running the ball. West Virginia will be able to run the football. You look at BYU's offense, they can't run the football. They're averaging 2.9 yards per carry, under 100 yards per game. So they're going to have to throw it. Keaton Slovis has a 12-6 ratio, but I rate West Virginia as the number 38 pass defense in the country. My pass defense ratings take into account the strength of opponent as well. So they've got the matchup is good. Now, how about the home field edge? I love West Virginia's home field edge here. I think the crowd's going to be allowed, as you mentioned. BYU coming off a road trip, traveling again. That's a tough task. In fact, it's their 3rd road game in 4 weeks, and it's the first one that's really across the country. So it's a long road trip as it is. And then the final factor here is I think West Virginia is a good football team, a fundamentally strong team. They run the football. They play good defense. BYU, I was scratching my head how this team got to 5-2, because they were 5-2 despite being outgained by about 100 yards per game. They had a win over Arkansas earlier this year where they're outgained by 143 yards. They had the game against Cincinnati where they're outgained by 203 yards and won. So I thought they were a fake team record-wise last week, and Texas proved it with a 35-6 win. So you add it all up together, I think the spread's legitimate here. In fact, I'd probably have it a little bit higher. I like West Virginia, and I would lay the 10 points this week. I think they win by more than 10 points this week. Should be a nice, impressive win for West Virginia, and set up a big game next week at Oklahoma.
Phil, before we get you out of here, I want to get your thoughts on this craziness of BYU and their home and road splits. It looks like there are 2 completely different teams when they play in Provo, and then when they head outside of their own stadium. What do you feel like is the major, I think, issue with that? Is it just the Big 12 play, the Big 12 schedule? Is it the week to week grueling schedule of the Big 12 play that's really kind of hurting this team right now?
I think that their home field is a really good advantage. They've got the grass, you've got the altitude, which is huge, and then you've got a rabid home crowd. I remember Dave Aranda went in there last year and said, we basically lost the game because of the home crowd. They threw off our snap counts, the quarterback got rattled, things like that. So all that makes BYU a much better team at home. Then on the road, they're pretty much the talented team that they are. That they show that their talent level that they are, which is not as good as they are at home. So I think the fact that they're better at home reflects in that road record, and the fact that on the road they pretty much show who they are. And like I said, they're being outgained by 91 yards per game, and yet they're a 5-3 team this year.
Yeah, that's a very, very odd stat for sure. So, Phil, we appreciate you joining us once again here on Phil Steele Friday, and we'll look forward to talking with you again next week.
Sounds good, guys. Bring home another Mountaineer victory this week. You should be able to, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. Certainly, for sure. Again, West Virginia, BYU this weekend at 7:00. A win gets West Virginia to bowl eligibility. Phil Steele, you can get his stuff at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. Sit tight. We'll be right back with our ITG handicap picks right after the break.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into our handicap segment here. Jed and I are going to make our picks for this week's game between West Virginia and BYU. So, Jed, what do you got for us this week?
I'm going to try and track our answers as we go so we don't have our homework assignments, but we're going on the air next week. Let's start with this. Beanie Bishop is the second most targeted defender in the Big 12. He's been targeted 55 times. But the most targeted defender, and not just the Big 12, but in all of college football, is BYU corner Jacob Robinson, who's been targeted 69 times. Beanie gets targeted quite a bit because, and Neil talked about that to some extent this week, he's more of a boundary corner. Now, for those listening at home, what that typically means, if the ball's on the hash, the boundary is going to be the short side of the field's going to be the wide side of the field, boundary and field. Well, teams like to take those easy access throws to the short side of the field. A lot of times that's what's attached to your RPO, your pass element, your pass piece. So it's not even just attacking the corner. It's just by virtue of offenses being designed for the easier access throws, you're going to attack that shorter side more often than you're going to attack the field side. So a lot of beanies are as a result of that. Whereas Jacob Robinson, now that doesn't mean Beanie is exclusively into the boundary. There are some exceptions. You'll see times when he's to the field, but by and large, he is a boundary corner, a short side corner. Now, when you look at Jacob Robinson, that's not necessarily as true. They don't really move their corners based on formation or field. It's more of a right and left corner proposition. So you'll sometimes see him to the boundary, sometimes see him in space to the wide side of the field. But here's what's interesting about Jacob Robinson. Despite the targets and all the catches that he's allowed, the longest catch he's allowed all season is 36 yards. So he keeps a lid on it. They like to attack him with the quick game. So my question quite simply is this: who will be targeted more, Jacob Robinson or Beanie Bishop? Now, opposing offenses and game plans should factor into this.
Yeah.
In other words, you'd ask yourself, who's going to throw more?
Which
So
would,
all those things baked into the equation, who's going to be targeted more? Jacob Robinson as the most targeted defender in the entire country, or Beanie Bishop, who's the second most targeted defender in the Big 12 behind Robinson?
I think it's got to be Beanie, right? I mean, because West Virginia is going to lean on the run game. They're going to play their identity of football. They're going to hold on to the rock for 35 plus minutes and run it all day long. Meanwhile, BYU, they don't have a run game. Like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, they can't run the ball. Phil mentioned they only average like 2 or 3 yards a carry. So I feel like they're going to have to take some shots, not only with those quick, easy outlet passes, but they're going to have to take some shots deep downfield too. So I'm going to say it's going to be Beanie Bishop.
Well, I hate that this is boring, but I'm going to agree with you again. And again, they're going to go after Beanie for a host of reasons, but a lot of it is what we
Right.
just talked about. And it's not to say we won't game plan to go after Jacob Robinson. You just hope that the flow of the game, we're going to present as a more balanced offense. We're not going to put the football in the air 45 times. They may. So the opportunities are going to be there to go after anybody on the West Virginia defense. I mean, I might even say that Malachi might be targeted as much. Malachi's not targeted nearly as much as a field corner as Beanie is, but what's interesting about that, and one of the things I look at, Schuyler, is there's a metric called average depth of target. And when you look at Beanie's average depth of target, it's only 12.2 yards. That kind of signifies, whereas Malachi's is 16 yards.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. In other words, they're attacking the boundary with the quick game, like I said, often tied to the RPO. So it's not a bunch of deep shots. And that's not necessarily the case with Jacob Robinson. It's not that people are going after him with the deep ball. Oh, no, he's targeted all the time, so watch out, he gets beat deep all the time. That's not the case. Just a steady diet of quick throws, by and large, is what he's seen. But we both agree Beanie will be targeted more. That's boring. So maybe we part ways here on number 3. We've talked quite a bit about BYU's struggles in running the football. Not only do they struggle running the football, but they struggle running the football both home and away. They just haven't found the success behind that offensive line this year that they have in years past. Part of that might be, we talked about this in the preview, the lack of athleticism or the dual threat nature of the quarterback. You don't have that in Keaton Slovis. With Jared Hall in the past, you had that. They certainly don't have it now. So that's contributed to this, among other things. In other words, it's 11 on 10 football when they're trying to run, as opposed to when you're defending West Virginia against Garrett, it's 11 on 11 football. So here's question number 3. BYU is 14th in the Big 12 in rushing yards, 81 to be specific, 81.3. That'll come in later on. West Virginia has held 5 of 8 opponents below their season rushing average, and we've held 3 of 5 Big 12 opponents below their season rushing average. Will WVU hold BYU below their season average of 81.3 yards?
And that's,
in other words, 81 would do it because it's 81.3. That's why I put the decimal in there.
You know, again, West Virginia has not fit the run well at all in these last few games. I'm trying to guess which way you're leaning so I can take it. No, I'm just kidding. I'll go. No, I'll go first. I'll go with I'll go over, I guess. Just because, again, the defense hasn't been playing well. I don't think they get over it by a lot by any means. I think they maybe get 85, 90 yards. One big run could really help them in getting that number. So I'll go with the over, even though my gut tells me the under makes a lot of sense.
The under is ambitious at 81 yards. That's really aggressive.
It is.
I'm going to go with it. And here's why I'm going to go with it. On the road, they're averaging 68 yards a game rushing. BYU is. Now, part of what's going to factor into BYU's run game, something else we talked about in the preview, they have a true freshman in LJ Martin. He was dinged up 2 weeks ago late in the Texas Tech game, which was his best performance. He was pushing 100 yards. He didn't finish. He warmed up last week before the loss in Austin to the Longhorns, but didn't play. I keep checking for things on his status this week, but I can't find anything. I would assume he's going to play. If he was warming up last week and taking some reps on the field, which he was, I'm going to assume he's going to play. I don't know that he's enough of a difference because even when you look at his numbers, his average yards per carry, and he's a pretty dynamic kid. His average yards per carry in Provo are 5.8 yards per carry, but his average yards on the road are 3.4. Everything steers toward a team that struggles to run the football has struggled even more to do so when they leave and hit the road. So I'm going to take the ambitious choice and go West Virginia. Once again, 5 out of 8 times we've done it, held the opponent under their season average, but this is a much lower season average. This is pretty aggressive. I'm going to say we do it. I'm going to go with the under. So we diverge paths finally on number 3. So there's one we disagree with. Good.
Technically, because I do kind of see a path to the under for sure as well. So I do like
this too, Schuyler.
Big back. Yeah.
It was difficult to not incorporate one of these picks on turnovers because they're tied for the Power 5 lead in takeaways with
12
18.
interceptions.
And when you look at their wins, they're plus 12 in their wins and minus 4 in their losses. I thought about it, but something tells me we're going to have another opportunity with turnovers with Oklahoma here in a couple weeks. So I kind of put that on the shelf.
Yeah. So maybe that'll be a part of our ITG picks next week. Let us know your thoughts in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, and you can kind of play along as we do with our weekly Big 12 picks as well. If you haven't done that yet, make sure to go to our Twitter page or X page, whatever you want to call it. We have the poll up there. If you can vote, or if you'll be able to vote and compete against Jed, Wes, Owen, and I to see if you can become the first person ever to get all 4 picks right. And also,
by the way,
yeah,
the 3 out of 4 Mike Vest.
Yes, yeah. I meant to bring that up. We forgot to get his picture in late, but Jed told me not to worry about it. So
actually, he didn't forget. What he did was Schuyler said he looked at that picture and he saw this handsome young man, and he's like, "Well, who's this grungy looking old guy that this handsome young man's standing with?" And it was Mike Vest and his handsome son. In the picture at Mountaineer Field. We didn't want to subject the viewers of YouTube and this podcast to I'm sure there'll be future opportunities for Mike Vest to have his picture on the podcast. There's no doubt about that. But buddy ours down in the southern part of the state.
Yeah, it could maybe even happen next week. Maybe he is the first man.
He did tell me. He texted me and said the winners are in.
That's right.
He texted me and said the winners for this week.
He took some shots. He took some shots at you. So.
He did.
One final thank you to Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Make sure to visit fortis.us.com. We thank you guys for tuning in with us all week here on In the Gun. If you want to go back and check out our episodes, go to our YouTube page, hit that subscribe button. We've got the West Virginia BYU preview up, our weekly picks. You can go as far back to the episode with Big Daddy recapping that game against UCF in Orlando last week. So we thank you guys for watching. For Jed Drenning, I'm Schuyler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. You've been In the Gun.